Today we're here to talk about HR and AI. We're going to be covering a range of really practical tips to supercharge your work, some of the aspirational elements of AI, some of the challenges in adopting it. We've got two fantastic speakers joining us today who I'll introduce shortly. Firstly and foremostly, thank you to everybody joining us. This is a fantastic webinar in joint with our partners at Shiloh. We're very happy to host you today. My name is Damon Andreasen. I am the VP of Sales for APJ at HiBob, and I'm going to be your host and MC for this session. Before we jump in, just some very light housekeeping for you all. Firstly, audio and video, the most important parts of any webinar. If you're having any issues technically, if you can't see me or the slides, please post in the chat. We are monitoring it. Secondly, questions. We'd love this to be an engaged and collaborative conversation. You've got two fantastic speakers here today who have a wealth of experience. Please feel free to add any questions. If there's someone specific you'd like them to answer, please mention their name and we'll weave it into the Q&A section of today. The last piece is we will be recording today, so post this session, we will email you all with the recording so you can have that and share that as you need. Before we jump in, two very quick introductions to both HiBob and Shiloh. Jenny, maybe toggle on to the next slide for me. So who are HiBob and Shiloh? HiBob, we are a modern HCM company for modern businesses. We have been in operations for around 10 years. We're a global HCM company with over 4,000 customers worldwide. We've been in the APJ region now for about 3.5 years with well over 300 customers. We are an end-to-end HCM platform, hire to retire, everything from ATS, core, LMS, workforce planning, and compensation. And we're joined today with Ilona Charles, the CEO and founder of Shiloh People. Shiloh is a people-first HR solutions and strategic consulting company. They support HR teams from fundamental operations to high-level strategy, and they also align with HR technology, businesses, and people strategies if you are doing vendor selections as well. Together, if you want to just toggle to the next slide, Jenny, we partner to integrate HR tech with business needs. We help businesses automate and optimize people processes, and we enable HR teams to focus on value-driven activities in an effort to remove all of those low-level but very highly manual and repetitious tasks. So very excited to be here today. I'll do a quick introduction to our two speakers. Firstly and foremostly, Ilona Charles, who is the CEO and founder of Shiloh. And we're also joined by Ellie Miller, who is the Chief People Officer of Leonardo AI. I think they both bring very interesting perspectives to today's conversation. Ilona obviously has a very broad overview of the market, working with hundreds of clients across the APJ region. And Ellie Miller as Chief People Officer, and probably one of the only CPOs or very few CPOs who are working in an AI company. So we'll also bring a very interesting perspective in terms of what they're doing. Before we get in today, we're going to do a really quick poll. We want to understand what the audience's biggest challenges are in terms of adopting and implementing AI in your HR teams. If you could go ahead and start voting, we'll take about 60 seconds here to get a little bit of a temperature gauge on the audience. This is going to be really helpful. We will post these results as well in the chat for everybody to see. So we've got biggest challenges being a lack of knowledge or expertise. I'm certainly no stranger to that one. It is a steep learning curve. There's lots to take on, and the amount of change that's happening in AI is incredible. Budget constraints, something we're always challenged with. Resistance to change within the organization, one, winning hearts and minds, and how this can actually help really drive efficiency in organizations. And the last one, data privacy and compliance concerns, one which I am also not a stranger to, having a very robust InfoSec team at HiBob. So I'll just give it another 30 seconds. We'll let the last of these come in and then we'll post. But it looks like very much at the lead of this, the biggest challenge we're seeing is just a fundamental lack of knowledge or expertise in this space. And as I said, I definitely share that positioning. It's a steep learning curve. So we're going to jump in. Alona's going to take us through a very short presentation of about 4 slides, just to give us a bit of a state of play of what she is seeing in the market. So Alona, I'm going to pass over to you.
Thank you so much, Damien. Thanks everyone for coming along. And that poll is a really good lead in to the few slides that I have today. I'm not going to talk too long to these. But as you're probably all aware, 75% of organizations are still in very early adoption of AI. I think, there's still some perceptions around whether this is just the latest buzz, but I'm here to tell you, as I'm sure you all know, it is well and truly here and advancing every day, it seems. So keeping up around that knowledge is absolutely critical and very challenging, to be honest, as well. Just a little anecdote, I've heard of 2 new AI terms already in the last week. We've all heard of large language models now and ChatGPT, but now I've heard of agentic AI, which is autonomous AI, and then also the vibe coding. Ali may have heard of that where she is, but it's around coders primarily, but it's just changing constantly. So yeah, I think we're probably all dabbling in ChatGPT and other things like that, but there is so much more that we need to get across. And I think our biggest challenge as HR leaders is really keeping up with all of that change for ourselves, our functions, and our workforces. So I think it's a huge challenge for all of us. I might move on to the next slide. Thanks, Jenny. So a recent survey by ARI, the Australian HR Institute, found that 3 out of 4 HR professionals lack the AI knowledge they need. So that really does coincide with the almost 60% in that poll who have said knowledge and expertise is the key issue. I think I think most people believe that it's okay, but are still not sure around whether there's biases or not, particularly around recruitment. I think we've all seen in HR actually the use of AI for quite a long time. We've probably just not talked about it as AI. So, applicant tracking system, HR systems, CRMs on the customer side all use AI to a certain extent, but we're probably not thinking about it that actually is AI. And what are some of the biases, particularly I think in recruitment that we need to consider. So there's pros and cons to all of these things. Yeah, so I think that's probably the main thing I wanted to touch on there. I just think probably for most of you, and I'd be keen to hear when we're in the panel, just how many are actually, really starting to strategically think about how they use AI in the workplace. I've been talking to a few clients recently, and it's really different depending on the type of industry you're in, the size of your workforce, the amount of funding and resource that you have to go with it. So even a difference between, say, professional services, management consulting versus financial services, the focus in on AI is completely different, as you might expect. But it was just brought home to me last week, and particularly in management consulting and professional services, they actually have to be leading it internally because they then have to sell that to their clients. So the amount of work they're doing from an HR perspective internally is phenomenal compared to most. So I think they're a bit of an outlier because of the client interaction they have. But absolutely phenomenal what people are having to do in HR around AI at the moment. So I might move on to the next one. This was some work Deloitte have done. The references on the slide, and we can always come back to this later. But like with most things, there are certain stages of maturity around AI, as there are with most things. At the moment, I would say, the large bulk of clients are sitting around that sort of inexperienced and exploring AI. As I mentioned a bit earlier, it's really things around, using ChatGPT probably, both personally and in professionally, maybe using it to write some LinkedIn blogs, maybe using it to write some position descriptions, possibly even policies. But from what I've seen, that's sort of where it's landing. And recruitment, I think, is probably the biggest one. But as we move up that maturity chain, we start to see a more structured and disciplined approach to strategy around AI. So I think for HR, that's probably where our biggest challenge is going to be when we've got all of our day jobs, having to get across how fast AI is moving, what the implications are for our workforce, and then actually putting in place a proactive strategy to address that, not only for your function, but for the workforce. The business and your organization is going to expect it. So how do we do all of that? And hopefully that's part of today's outcome, that we can provide some practical tips on how to do that. So last slide. Just some of the barriers to overcome, and I've probably touched on these, but this just gives a more structured approach to what some of the key barriers are, and hopefully through the panel discussion we can touch on how we might be able to help with some of these. I think we've well and truly covered the limited AI understanding. I still think that's probably the most important one. Data privacy also came up in the poll. I think that's huge. Interestingly, on decision deferral, that's where HR is sort of deferring the AI decisions to other people, maybe in the organization, like IT or other executives. So rather than taking ownership of it, they're sort of delegating that to others. Financial constraints, I think, is fairly self-evident. Delivery limitations. Now, I'm sure you can all relate to this, but HR is usually fairly lean. So the ability to really plug the resourcing gap and focus on the future, as well as trying to do the current, is, I think, probably one of the biggest ones we see from a client perspective in the work that we do. But there is real opportunity around that administrative burden that's listed there, around how we can use AI really proactively to try and move on some of that, the administrative stuff. And then technology barriers. We've got multitudes of platforms, and this is something HiBob, Damien, I'm sure will want to comment on, but multiple platforms, some of which are using AI already. Data everywhere. Is the data in a fit form to be able to use AI effectively? These are just some of the barriers that we're seeing, but this slide just gives you a bit of a structured view of what some of those barriers are, and hopefully some of you on the call can relate to it. I think that's it for me, Damien.
Yeah.
Hopefully that just gives people a bit of an overview of where the current state is. I didn't really introduce myself. I did forget to do that, Damien. You already did it. I am the co-founder. I do have a partner in crime, Shana Peters, who is also my co-founder. And hopefully some of you will know me on the call, but I have been in and around HR for way too long to talk about. Surely retirement must be around the corner somewhere, but I don't think so at the moment. But yeah, very long career in HR.
Well, with what we're hearing about AI, maybe retirement will come for all of us in the next 10 years. I don't know. There's
Yeah,
a lot
quite
of
possibly.
very, techno optimists out there who believe we're all going to be replaced in short order by, the robots, the AI, and the convergence of both. So I'll get the popcorn to the side and see, but maybe retirement's coming for all of us. Thank you so much for the insights, Alona. I think one of the things that stands out to me is just how complex this topic is. There's a huge amount of layers to it, and it's kind of an interesting piece to talk about AI and start to peel some of those layers back to really understand how do you start, where do you start your journey on AI? What are the resources? What's the strategy? And I think the interesting thing that you touched on there is you can have a strategy, but actually getting your AI tooling up and running as a really big component of your business is far more challenging, and it's something that has to be done across an organization as opposed to just by a department. And that's certainly something that we're learning on our journey to adopt AI at HiBob at the same time as well. So yeah, really looking forward to jumping in the conversation. And also welcome, Ellie. I know you're in the UK at the moment. Okay, I'm back. It wouldn't be a webinar if we didn't have technical issues and a Zoom dropout. Apologies about that. I'll try and make sure that it's connected. Maybe it's post cyclone up here, but it has been a bit patchy since we had that tropical event up in Queensland. Ellie, I'm sorry, I missed if you've introduced yourself already.
No, I haven't. I'm very happy to go ahead now, though. Hi, everybody. I'm Ellie. I'm the Chief People Officer here at Leonardo AI. We are, as the name suggests, an AI company. So our flavor of AI is content creation, and that looks like image generation or motion video generation. And we're very excited also to have been acquired by Canva last year. So part of Canva's family of brands too.
Yeah, a phenomenal result. And Ellie, as I said before, I think you've probably got a really unique perspective here. I don't know how many CPOs are in the region or even worldwide that are working with an AI company who are also probably adopting internal tooling for AI as well. So really looking forward to hearing your perspective as well. And I might kick off and ask you the first question is, in your perspective and from your experience, what are the biggest opportunity that AI presents for HR teams?
I think looking after ourselves first, the biggest win is reducing the busy work that keeps us really bogged down sometimes in administrative work. To Alona's point, that administrative burden, we make jokes about being replaced by AI. My dream and my very confident perspective is we won't be replaced by it, but we can replace some really easy work that we end up getting dragged into. So for me, that is something like custom trained GPTs on your handbook and your policies. And then you have a chatbot where you're used to getting maybe 10 Slacks a day or messages a day with the same questions. If you could actually have something that's really interconnected with your ecosystem. So let's say it's actually connected with HiBob and you can say, how many days of holiday do I have left? And what's the policy if I want to take that? And oh, can you go ahead and book that for me? That happening without having to talk to someone in the people team, I believe we don't lose much by opening our world to allowing people to self-serve in this way. And that's a massive win for people teams, not because I think we'll start replacing these roles, but I think we'll end up working in a much more strategic territory day to day that allows us to stay much more connected with the business. And I hear one of the biggest fears about AI coming into especially a people space with the word people is the human connection. So if you can replace where actually you're not getting this unique human connection from having repetitive conversations about administrative topics and go into that management strategic space with truly partnering on the things that are keeping them up at night, the value of that people team shoots up. So I think that's a huge win. The other area where I see a real win, and I think Alona's slides have hinted on everything I'm going to say today, so thank you for setting it up so beautifully, is hyper personalization. So imagine an employee experience where your onboarding journey picks all of the right content, knowing what level you are, what region you're in, what department you've joined, and who your manager is. And it's constantly giving you the most up-to-date information of what's going on in that area of the business, but also a snapshot of what's going on in the rest of the business. Every job I've ever had, I have found to be chasing my tail around onboarding content, and the moment I've updated it, the next week it's out of date. If you can have something that, as we get more comfortable in the AI space with data privacy concerns and with people knowing that your data is being well handled, then we can open up access to your data in a way that is smart and says, Damien's just joined this department and now he's getting this beautifully personalized content. That's great for the warm and fuzzies, but actually what it's great for is time to productivity. And everybody talks about there being a productivity challenge, and especially now we're working in hybrid remote settings. That's really exciting to be able to say there are some tangible things we can do to help people continue being even more productive, which is brilliant. In the L&D space, I've seen some amazing work from a great HR leader here in Sydney. She's called Beck Donnelly, and she is already in that L&D space using AI for presentation making, which is brilliant, but also then in the L&D space using AI avatars to help deliver what could be some compliance-based content or some onboarding content, and localizing that content for different global regions as well. So you can then use an avatar who can help explain that in a localized language. And where you've got a HQ and lots of global hubs, that's invaluable where that hub might not be big enough yet to put boots on the ground in the people team. So long term, past those really exciting wins, I could see us using it in the data space where you may have really large data sets and you can create connection across the people team's data and the finance team's data, and actually starts to get you closer to more predictive analytics, where that's something, even I'm a data enthusiast, I do not have the tools or skills to be using predictive analytics right now. But if I had AI that could connect those dots for me, I could probably anticipate a lot more of what's going on within my business. So again, it relies on us getting more comfortable with where we are with data and AI, but I think long term we will get there, and that's really exciting.
I love those points that you made, and I think in particular HR and finance are two really great areas where, you know, I think a lot of AI around analytics as well is you need a system of record with a lot of deep structured data, and these two areas, especially in HR, is ripe for this as well. And the ability to access that data and almost democratize it down to management level where you can do natural language data queries, and in seconds, you can have multiple data points that typically might sit in 2 or 3 different reports, collating into a really interesting point of view within seconds, just empowers people to really know exactly what's happening. I think we're starting to see the emergence of this in a lot of HR tooling, and I think it's very early days, but will only move forward. I've got a little bit of a question mark around this one myself, which I keep pondering is, does this fundamentally shift the UI of tools like HCMs? Do we move to a bit of a chat first type environment, a little bit more like ChatGPT, where you just go, I want to kick off these workflows, I want this data, can you help me do this? And agentic AIs go off and do it all in the background. It might be a little bit of an aspirational goal, but I think we're moving closer and closer to it, which is pretty exciting. An unbelievable list of things that you're using at the moment, Ellie, and really interesting. And I might just zoom back out a bit and Ilona, bring you back into the conversation, ask you, what are you seeing? What do you see across the broader range of businesses that you're working with? Where are the big gains that people are really looking to focus on as a first or second step?
Yeah, I think it's still really early days, to be honest. I think we deal with such a range of clients in terms of size of organization and access to resources. So I think some of your small organizations aren't even close to using some of this yet. I think some of your larger, more resourced organizations, like I mentioned earlier, are experimenting. So I think the obvious ones we're seeing are the more automation and efficiency sort of play. So, taking away, as Ellie said, some of that administrative burden, I think early days. I think, you mentioned L&D. I think we're starting to see just a little bit around greater personalization around career paths. What are my performance, coming out of my performance reviews and my performance plan, what are the things I need to focus on? I think we'll see that only evolve. And I actually think that's one of the biggest opportunities is around that real personalization of and individualization of development plans and sort of capability uplift. I think I heard a great example yesterday, actually, in the remuneration space, which I hadn't really thought about, but, often with remuneration, you're looking at benchmarking roles. And one of the most critical parts of that is making sure your peer group that you're benchmarking against is the right peer group. So this REM specialist, what they did, they were working with a med tech company. The drug names were about 1 million miles long. So, in terms of understanding the actual product, it was really difficult. So what they did was plugged it into ChatGPT or one of those, put in the names of the drugs and said, this is the sort of company size. And it went away and found the top 20 or 50 similar. So basically the peer group for that remuneration to be able to benchmark, and it prioritized the order. So this is the closest one to what you're looking, your current organization, and here's the priority order of that peer group. Now that would have taken days and days and days and days of work for a REM person to do that peer group matching. So yeah, this is just an example of something I heard yesterday. So it's evolving all the time.
It's that interesting kind of access to knowledge as well. I'm interested if either of you are seeing or hearing examples of people using ChatGPT to do, the first 50% of the work to get the start, right? Like drafting policies, pulling in information, doing research, and it gives you a head start. It's not where you land. You obviously customize to your own needs, but are you seeing this in practical terms as well? And maybe an open question to both of you, or where you might be using it yourselves?
I was just going to say, Damien, that's what I do. So I've just, I used to write all my own articles. I love writing. I used to do everything myself. And now if I need a bit of a research base, which you should have if you're writing an article on something, I at least get it to source some of the information. You can ask it to reference it. You can ask it to use Australian references and spelling. And I find that just saves an inordinate amount of time. Just and the more you use it, the more you learn how to prompt with the right questions. And so it is a bit of a trial and experimentation, but the more you use it, it'll increase from 50%, I think, to 80%, and then you're just tweaking that last little bit of an article or a blog or whatever it is you might be doing.
Yeah, it's hard to stare at a blank page sometimes. Easier when you've got the first couple of paragraphs sorted for you. And I always say to people, it's easier to edit than to create. So, if I'm editing something from, a 50% mark, it's far, far easier, especially when so many of us are context switching so often to be able to get things done efficiently and effectively. Having that as a cheat code, I've found it pretty helpful as well. Ellie, how about yourself?
All the time, very similarly to the two of you, I much prefer to start with something, and I can take quite a critical eye. So I think some people worry if I use AI, or if people in my company use AI to start work, will it be of poor quality? Actually, I find that by having a starting point that wasn't created by yourself, you're much less personally attached to it. So your strategic thinking and your excellence in your brain goes towards, okay, now I know how I want it to look, because it either needs to look more like this or less like this, and you can really refine. In our business, that looks like spinning up drafts really quickly of documents. That looks like supporting leaders with talking points. Let's say they've said, I need to have this conversation. It might be one that me as a people person would find not easy to have, but clear on how to structure it. But for a first-time manager, perhaps they would find that incredibly daunting. So for me, I'm thinking, I know how to do this, but actually writing the talking points would take me a while. Let me give the context. Obviously, I'm not giving names of people in the business or any confidential information, but I can spin something up and then I add the actual nuance that is missed by what comes back out. Similarly, we're using it all the time for interview questions, for drafting job specs for brand new roles, and there's always the finesse at the end, but having that starting point just allows us to move at pace, which is so crucial.
Yeah. You both touched on a bit of an interesting thing here, which, through our journey, which is very early on at HiBob, and we're definitely, have been pushed in a direction to start adopting AI in everything we do internally, not from a product perspective, but actually how we operate to gain greater efficiencies, is actually some of the fundamental learning steps that we've been through. Is we've hired a few people to come in and actually do AI training. And a lot of it starts at creating a GPT, setting the memory of the context of what you want it to do, how it should interact, how it should work with you, and then learning how to build effective prompts, which feels like, again, like it's an interesting thing that you're relearning, right? Like, how do you actually interact with ChatGPT to get the best out of it? And so for me, that's been one of the biggest kind of lessons that I've seen so far is like, you've got to start at the fundamentals and understanding how the tool works and how to get the best out of it. Otherwise, you're going in a little bit blind and expecting it to do great things for you automatically, and you haven't kind of set the right context and parameters. I'm interested to throw back to the two of you as well and ask on that topic about like, what are the biggest lessons you've learned in your own roles or across the companies that you're working in about the adoption of AI? What's worked? What's not worked? What are some of the shortcuts that maybe you can share with the audience? And Ellie, I might throw to you.
I think one of the most interesting things has been outside of just the HR space, but in order to get that AI adoption that you're talking about, Damien, as each company is starting to realize we have to broaden our approach to this, has been we did a hackathon last year, and that focused on AI everywhere in our business. So we set some really clear guardrails, and guardrails sound limiting, but they're actually about how can we free people up to have a bit of a free for all for this hackathon and actually try loads of new tools and to spin up prototypes and test and learn, and for us to learn really, really quickly what might have immense value over and above other things in our business. So we gave people access to get the right protections that they needed through the right tier of pricing and product without needing to commit. Something that's brilliant about a lot of AI products is you're on monthly rolling subscriptions. So you can buy a month with little commitment, but by buying a subscription, normally you're also getting some more guarantees around how your data will be used. And using that to then inform, one, the excitement that we have in our business about AI. As an AI business, you still need to drive excitement and adoption of AI tooling. We don't just automatically have it nailed. What we have nailed is people's readiness and accepting of AI. And two, it also allowed us to then say, great, we learned so much. We're doubling down on these things because these are the things that played out for us in that hackathon. So sometimes one of the biggest fears is, what if we're using 20 different AI tools in our business or 5 different tools to solve the same one thing? I actually think that's okay. And if you do it in a structured way and then say, okay, now we don't want to be using as a business 5 different LLM tools and 5 different versions of meeting note takers. So now we've decided our playbook are these ones. And this is how we're going to roll out an enterprise level subscription for those things to democratize everybody's access. And it's not just the early adopters that continually get access to these things. By doing that, it becomes part of your workflow. And I find even talking really, really proudly about your use of AI. So I will say, I've spun up this job description. I did start with ChatGPT and I've refined it from there, but let me know what you think. I say it unashamedly because if I can role model that I believe it has value to me, then it reduces some of the, I guess, confidence gap that some people have coming into it.
We did a similar thing with the hackathon, and what I loved about it is it was much more of a bottom up, and it was a question back to the teams of like, where can you see this really helping you to remove a huge amount of manual work, and how do you want AI to work in your day to day so that you will adopt it? And instead of it coming top down of like, it was very broad, we're adopting AI. You as a team go and work out where the low hanging fruit is that you really want this to solve. Go and build similarly some prototype GPTs. And then stack rank the top 3 or 4 by impact, and then start actually investing in integrations to get more data into it and all that kind of stuff. It's been a great process, and we've done something similar, which has been great. And Alona, what about you? What are you seeing as like the lessons that you're seeing from your customer base, and maybe the things that haven't quite gone as well as what people hoped for? Maybe some of the shortcuts people can think about in helping to like start to roll this out within their organization.
Oh, it's a big question, Damien. In terms of things going wrong, I'm not sure I've seen that yet. I think what I'm seeing is a nervousness more than anything, just and it might be HR, but it might be organization wide as well, just around so many concerns around data privacy and sensitivity and data, you know, like just and you know, what if everyone's using it and it's all uncontrolled? So I don't know that I'm seeing anything going wrong, particularly because I think this is one of those technologies where you just keep trialing it and iterating and learning as you go. And I think sometimes I've seen in HR, particularly over, you know, over my career, we can like to have things, you know, 120% right before we sort of proceed to the next thing. We've got to cover off every single risk before we move ahead. That's we just don't have time to do that. And that's not how organizations really work today. And I think we as HR professionals need to sort of take that on board and say, okay, at a personal level, and it's the same what we do, you know, with leadership. You know, it's like that self-awareness level, so that you know where you're sort of at, so that then you can help others. A bit to your point around role modeling as well, Ali. You know, so test and learn, and you can't really break it. It's like you can't really break it, so you just won't get the results you want. So to me, I haven't seen anything really particularly not working. I think it's just more that hesitation, but I actually just don't think we've got time to hesitate, because the technology is literally evolving daily, weekly.
Yeah, incredibly rapidly.
Yeah.
It's a great segue, Ilona, because we've got a couple of questions from the audience that I think touch on maybe some of the challenges they're facing as opposed to the lessons. The questions that we're getting are actually a lot about how InfoSec and tech are really holding maybe an outsized level of control over what I guess the AI strategy is, and in particular for HR. Have either of you experienced or seen this, and is there any kind of insights or tips that you can give the audience on how maybe to help balance the playing field a little bit here and take back some control on the AI strategy?
Wow. I'm sure, Ali, I'm sure you've got some views. To me, this is age old, right? So it's not it's not specific to AI. And it depends probably on the size of the organization and the risk profile of the organization. But HR needs to own this, if you think about it. This is not a coding discussion. This is not actually a technology discussion per se. This is around your workforce and how you make your workforce more productive, more personalized, improve the employee experience, you know, all of those things that we as HR professionals sort of own from a strategic perspective. So I think at the ground level, you probably got, you know, interactions with IT that aren't working, but I actually think there needs to be an organizational position around AI and any other technologies that are new, and who owns them strategically. You know, at the end of the day, at an exec level, you have to have some sort of ownership or sponsorship. And I would argue that HR actually should own this one. Now that'll be topical and will be really hard to get through, I suspect. But it's really important. Like, there's no easy solution to that, except that this is so critical to workforce productivity and engagement. There is a really, really strong argument for HR to own this strategically. Sorry, I sound a bit passionate there on my soapbox,
No,
but
that's a great point of view. Love it. Ellie, how about you? Maybe you see less resistance because you're AI first. Maybe not. That's an assumption. What are you saying?
I've not seen a ton of resistance in my company in particular for quite obvious reasons. But what I would say is I really do empathize with the fact that there are real concerns around this space is evolving so quickly, and there have been lots of scaremongering around what's happening with your data. I would say in that specific example, there are a couple of things you can do. Alona's point of kind of trying to get the people to zoom out of this being an InfoSec discussion and more about where does our company want to go with it will help to break down those barriers. But if you could work out what specifically is the concern, I would bet it would be around the sharing of confidential information in the AI kind of space. And I think that with some of the tools that are really in the space of you using ChatGPT, for example, that is solvable. And so you can combat some of that resistance by getting down to specifics. If it's about data concerns, you can have policies around not uploading anything that includes any personal identifying information, which should go without saying, but doesn't, so it's worth getting down somewhere. If it's around actually there are bigger infosec concerns and you're in a bigger company, perhaps you've got certain certifications like SOC 2 that you need to be able to prove where your data is being stored. It might be that actually you only use subscriptions where you can have an enterprise level subscription and know that there are specific guarantees at the terms and conditions level. But no, outside of some of the big players like OpenAI, there a lot of the companies you'd be speaking to are really startup scale-ups. So normally you can actually engage in a conversation with the right people to help understand past just what's written in T's and C's. What does this actually mean? So know that this is something that you can overcome. Don't let that barrier be something that stops you from pushing past it, because I really do think it's the future of our roles to understand how to use this well.
I think the point that was made about it being a company-wide mandate and strategy is a really pertinent one. And it's something that's happened at HiBob. And, one of the things that we've seen, which has been great in terms of tooling up here, is actually we've got an AI specialist now that works in each of the departments. So the mandate's out, we're adopting AI. Now it's like you've got specialists to help you to set this up. And the second piece is you go figure out like what is the low lift and the highest impact that you can get to as soon as possible. And we're in a very unique and very privileged position to have a CEO and a C-suite that's pushing this as a major agenda for us. But the idea of pulling it up and out of tech and actually how do you get support from the entire C-suite for this to be a part of your overall company mandate, I think is an interesting position that certainly I've seen work at HiBob, I should say. I know we're running down to the wire. It's been a great conversation. I'm going to have one more question, and there's a few here that I'm going to choose from. I'm going to pick the one that's directed at Ellie, but I think Lona, you can add to this as well. And that's, how do you see AI transforming traditional HR roles over the next 3 to 5 years? I think that's a great one to end on.
I think they're going to become a lot of fun. I really do. I think that people will have to keep increasing their level of technical skill. If you're the kind of person that already loved the automation and data space, I think there's a natural evolution into adopting AI. If that's not something that you've got experience with, I just think over the next 3 to 5 years, it will start being really explicitly part of interview processes for roles. We're certainly already asking people how they use AI, which makes sense in our business. And we want people to proudly say they do use it and here's how they can get value from it. I think in 3 to 5 years, we'll also be focusing much more on the strategic value that you deliver and what have you done with the time that you've saved from all of this amazing automation, as we will have worked out how to make use of agentic AI in the HR space. I've seen one of the questions in the chat talked about what will we do with HR admin roles. I think they'll become far more interesting with more interesting and complex problems to solve. And I think that people may end up coming into their HR career actually a more kind of knowledge worker style space where you can take the knowledge that you can more quickly learn, but apply it in much more interesting ways and maybe go down more of an advisory route earlier in your career. But I think we'll open up new pathways that perhaps we're barely scratching the surface of. And I think that's really exciting. What I will say is it's going to happen anyway. So the more we can embrace it and use this time where everybody is testing and learning to get ahead, the better. I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
A techno optimist. I'm a fan. It's an exciting time to be thinking about how this all shifts. Ilona, let's wrap up with you. Where do you think the AI profession, how does it change over the next 3 to 5 years with this new tooling?
I don't think I have a lot more to add than what Ali said. I think it's absolutely right. I do think we need to think about the career paths though, and I think that piece around the admin roles is something that we just need to consider around how people come into HR and what that looks like. But I think it's an exciting time for HR. I think my encouragement to everyone though is we need to embrace it and we need to evolve and almost try and be ahead of the game, because this really has such big impacts around workforce, which is what our jobs are there to support, that it really is incumbent on us as a profession to learn as much as we can about it, take take the time, experiment, test, learn, and push the boundaries internally in your organization around this, because it's only going to help us as a profession.
Yeah, completely agree. And I know there's a few other questions there, what we might do. And there's one in particular about recommendations on AI tooling that you might be able to be recommend. What we might do is might follow up with that offline and collect a little bit of a hit list from you both in terms of like, what are you using and what do you find to be really, effective in your organizations? And we can share that out to the participants post this as a bit of a follow up as well. But I know we're at time, and Ellie, I know it's late for you, so I want to say a big thank you to you for joining us all the way from the UK. It's very early in the morning for you now. You've entered into the new day. Thank you so much for joining us and to add your perspective. It's been great. Ilona, thank you so much to you and to Shiloh people for supporting this webinar. It's been great to get your insights and broader view across what you're seeing in the market. We've got a very quick poll that we've just popped up. We'd love to get your feedback. If you want to hear from either Ilona and her team on anything that she can help you with around adopting AI or anything else that you've got from a consulting perspective. And similarly, if you're looking for an AI first, well, an AI evolving and pretty amazing stuff, HCM, more than happy to talk to you about HiBob as well. But thank you both so much to everybody who's joined us today. I hope you got a lot of really great insights that you can take away with you. We have recorded the session, so we will make sure that we get that out to you, and I'll see if we can't get the hit list of AI tools from both Ellie and Ilona to share with you as a follow-up as well. So a big thank you to everybody. Have a great day, and thank you very much for participating.